Hi, folks. Welcome to season 2, episode 4 of the podcast. Today, my guest is Daniela Wolfe, and we're talking about how to increase your productivity and reduce your overwhelm. First, a bit about my guest. Daniela helps stressed and burnt out professionals ditch the guilt and overwhelm, productively manage daily tasks with ease, and have the time and energy for self-care every day. She's been a licensed master social worker for 27 years, focusing on self-care, stress management skills, mindfulness, relationships, parenting, and managing all the chaos of life. Her mission is to empower you to prioritize yourself on your to-do lists and to learn the strategies to make over your daily life. Welcome to the podcast, Daniela.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Kind of time management, productivity, burnout. They're things that came up a lot on season 1 of the podcast. So I am excited to get into a conversation talking about how we can be more productive, but without adding to overwhelm, because I think that's a big problem for people. And women have very busy lives. One of the complaints I hear from a lot of my clients is that they've got no time for themselves. I don't know, this is your zone of genius. So can you kick us off by sharing how a woman who's already overwhelmed can begin to make time for herself?
Absolutely. And definitely, I think, if we're working, if we have families, we do end up, unfortunately, carrying the majority of the load. And I think when it comes to making time for ourselves, there's actually a step that a lot of people, I believe, miss when it comes to that, because I think they need to do an action. But I actually, when I work with clients, I start with our mindset, because I think we need to look at how we're thinking about our time, how we're thinking about tasks in order to change how we're using it and how we're benefiting from it. Because even if, say, we did get 20 minutes for ourselves, 5 minutes for ourselves, but in our head, we're still running through our to-do list, feeling guilty, feeling, all these other things, we're not going to actually get the benefits from it. And we're still going to feel overwhelmed and stressed because we not only took time away, but we didn't get the dishes done. We didn't do all these things. And so by taking our mindset and looking at our thoughts about our time, expectations, whether they're real or just even assumed, looking at those limiting beliefs, where our guilt is coming from, is that first step in being able to make some more time for yourself. I believe then also I'm going to dive into a little bit of self-care in general, because I think the way people think about self-care is also what can trip us up. There's a lot of myths thinking it needs to be these luxuries, spa days, massages, it needs to be all this kind of time. And I disagree with that as well, because I think it's just like eating, sleeping, and brushing our teeth. It's a daily necessity that needs to be done on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be for long periods of time. So it's everything from how, yes, we eat, we sleep, we move, we connect with others, how we dress, how we decorate and organize our homes, how we think about money. There's so many small micro ways to implement self-care throughout our day, because self-care isn't just about feeling calm and relaxed. It's about building our confidence. It's about our energy, what we're putting out there. And so once we start to see the small micro moments in our day that we can start adding that in, it helps to create just a feeling of not only control in our day, but also a feeling of confidence, a feeling of, I've got this, I'm not overwhelmed, and the benefits just kind of spiral forward into everybody around us.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And it is very easy for me to sit and talk to you about my self-care routine because I don't have children at home anymore. And it's kind of, it's me and I work for myself. So I have a relatively loose and easy morning. And I notice a big difference when I put 15 minutes of meditation into my morning. When I've got 11 minutes on my timer. 11 minutes of yoga in the morning. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be big, an hour's yoga class. I can't fit that in. Well, again, this is very interesting when you talk about mindset shifts around time. I could fit that in. I
Mhm.
choose not to fit that in. So I'm
Absolutely.
making choices around my time with that. But even I figure 11 minutes of yoga is better than none. And I notice a big difference. And I think this is where the self-care piece is very interesting for women. Is self-care isn't selfish, but I think a lot of people tell themselves it is. The more you step up and you take care of your body, you take care of what's happening in your mind, the more you learn to use self-care as a means of managing your emotions, the better you can step up for the people around you. And I think that's something a lot of people forget.
And it's so subtle, and it can be done very or subconsciously as well, that we don't even realize those shifts are happening. Like you said, I'm the same way. I have a 10-minute yoga routine. There's 4-minute HIIT workouts if you want more intensity in a shorter burst of time. It's about the consistency and the achievement rather than that long drawn out process. Just like you can't eat on Sunday and think you're not going to be hungry by Tuesday, you can't do self-care once a week and think you're not going to be depleted 2 days later. We charge our phones on a regular basis. We make sure our cars don't run out of gas. And yet when it comes to ourself and our own energy, we wonder why we're so depleted, on a regular basis.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear from you for women who are very busy, maybe women who've got children, women who work for somebody else and don't have the luxury of doing what they want in the morning. What are some ways that very busy women can incorporate self-care into a routine without it becoming something that, oh my God, it's another thing on my to-do list? Because that's not self-care. If you're
Right. No.
like you've already touched on, like if you're trying to cram it in, you end up resenting the fact that you're going to meditate for 5 minutes, which is
A lot.
completely crazy.
But along that same line, when I do work with people who have a tough time, especially seeing in their schedule, how does this work? How do I fit it in? We start very simple, where you set a reminder on your phone for 1 minute, 5 times a day. And just for that 1 minute, you don't do anything as far as going on email, going on social media. You just sit. You can have a glass of water, maybe shrug your shoulders up and down, do some breathing, where you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, just for 1 minute. Okay. And it doesn't have to be sitting still quietly. You might be walking somewhere. You might be walking to the end of your driveway to get your mail. You might, be doing something for that minute, but just for 1 minute, 5 times a day, you now do have a 5-minute self-care practice. And I think we all have a minute, even if you're sitting in traffic, even if you're doing, just waiting in line at the grocery store for 1 minute, you can find a way to start kind of turning inwards, having that mindfulness where you're noticing things around you. Maybe you take your cup of coffee in the morning before you run out the door and you just kind of hold it. You feel the warmth of the cup. You savor that first sip. And by doing just those subtle little things, it doesn't seem like a lot, where all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel amazing. But, subconsciously, physiologically, your stress levels go down, your serotonin levels, go down, your cortisol goes down. You increase that dopamine hit of, you set a goal and you accomplished it now. And you start to feel good about yourself in that way as well. And like I said, using technology, it doesn't have to be remember to do it, but to have that 1 minute break. You can have your kids do it with you. This doesn't have to be done alone in isolation. Self-care can be loud, it can be laughter, it can be fun, but finding those micro moments throughout your day to integrate it. Like I said, start with that timer, 1 minute, glass of water, shoulder shrugs, and some breathing. You're now starting to get those benefits on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just so simple there is really no excuse for not being able to put a minute for yourself in the day. I like to go out, even if you go outside and go and sit and listen to the birds singing, wherever you are, even if you're in a city, if you sit quietly for a minute, you're going to hear birds singing. And that for me is very soothing. And it's just nice to, I think nature's very soothing to be in. So go for a walk, take your shoes off, put your bare feet on some grass for a minute. Like you've said, just mindfully drinking a cup of coffee. It's so important. And I love what you've touched on. I'm a heart math practitioner. So one of the things I teach people to do is to go and do 2 minutes of heart focused breathing a few times a day, especially if they're very overwhelmed and stressed. But I really love what you've added in there is not only are you reducing your stress levels, you're also getting a dopamine hit because you're actively you're setting a goal and you're actually achieving it. And I've not looked at it like that before. And I think that's a really powerful add-on to these little self-care practices that we're popping in.
Yeah, I had this other coach I chatted with once, and she was saying, even just if you want to add more movement, she brushes her teeth and she does squats while she's brushing her teeth because she have to brush her teeth for 2 minutes anyways. When I use the restroom at work, I go up and down the stairs after before I go back to my desk. Just those little moments, all of a sudden, if I really looked at it throughout the day, my steps, have increased up to 20,000, or, I've added 10 minutes of movement to my day. All those little moments, they do add up, and you do get those benefits where, like I said, you might not feel them all at once, but over time, you're able to respond rather than react to situations because you're not, so agitated and overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with a self-care routine like this, that's adding mindfulness and breathing in, like you've touched on. You're learning to calm your nervous system before it's getting stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nervous system regulation. I think it's something that's a term that's bandied around an awful lot at the moment. But it's a very powerful tool to learn. And really, it's about noticing when your stress response is rising and registering, I'm starting to feel stressed now. And then you have a choice in that moment, like you've said, to go for a quick walk, go sit outside for a minute and start to just calm it down before it goes completely off the rails. And before you know it, like you've said, you're in a state of being unable to respond because you've been triggered into reactivity. And it's training, it's retraining yourself.
Yeah.
And what you're sharing is so brilliant because it doesn't have to be hours of training. It's a minute a few times a day.
But you're still creating new neural pathways in your
Yeah.
brain, and that's the thing. People assume sometimes it can sound very like woo and very, kind of um, fluffy, but it is based in science. There's research behind the fact. And just like if you were going to go hiking in the woods, there's the path you've always followed that's well worn. But when you're creating a new path, you need to kind of practice it. You need to have that consistency so that you kind of automatically habituate it and don't have to think about it. And that's where you don't feel overwhelmed doing it because it's easy. It's something you flow into. It's something that you've automated. Just like we've automated our bad habits, we can automate good ones.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. It's just about a reframe with it. Is habits, if they're bad, can be, you can untrain them and you
Mm-hmm.
can replace them. Daniela, I'd love for you to share a little bit about productivity here. So we've talked about calming tools to calm the overwhelm. And often, I think when you learn these little habits of just calming the overwhelm, it's easier to think a bit clearer.
Mm-hmm.
When we can think more clearly, we can focus better.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just one step of being productive. Talk to us a little bit more about how, when you're very busy, you can learn to be more productive rather than just being stuck in busy tasks, which I think is a trap for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I love the way you started that too, because I also say when you think differently, you feel differently. And when you feel differently, you act differently. And that's why we start with the thinking, because then the feeling and acting automatically follow that. And so when it comes to kind of looking to be more productive, that intention, when you take the time to think about what's on your day, what's happening, and plan it out a little bit. And everyone has different styles. I know some people a little bit more boho and free spirited and don't want a super structured day. Other people, I like to do some time blocking and intentionally create space between my tasks. But I think knowing your priorities, being very specific about having those goals for not only the work tasks and family tasks, but also for your free time is how you make sure that it happens. I use Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where it breaks down kind of, you put your daily tasks into one of four quadrants, whether it's important and urgent, important and not urgent, urgent but not important, which means you don't have to always be the one to do it. And that's where you can start delegating, as well as what's not important when not urgent and needs to be removed completely. And it's amazing sometimes, how many things we don't even realize are in that last quadrant, but we still get sucked into doing them anyways. Or, we're always afraid to delegate. We're afraid to ask for help because of, again, that mindset, those limiting beliefs of what we assume other people are going to think of us or how we're judging ourselves because of it. And so if we're able to let those things go, I've close friends with a nutritionist, and she shares, a healthy meal doesn't always have to be completely homemade. You can pick up a rotisserie chicken at the store, some salad, and a couple of, pre-made pieces and create a really healthy meal. But all of a sudden, it's quick, it's easy, it's not a lot of work. You can still get that family time. You can still do those things if you reframe what that has to look like or how it has to happen. There's great meal services, to stay with that concept. So to look at the options, I believe, knowing what our options are is so important, because every day does look different, and having more than one way to achieve a goal is going to help us be flexible, help us find that balance. When I talk about balance, it's not about everything being equal. It's about how we adapt, how we pivot, how we have resilience, and how we set our boundaries. And when we have those four areas, we can adapt, we have options, we can go through things differently, because life's going to happen out of our control anyways. And we have those boundaries, that's where we're going to feel that balance and peace rather than that constant busy.
Yeah, and I think something I've been talking about a lot at the moment with clients and on my socials is this piece about setting boundaries and people pleasing. And it's amazing how when you talk about the quadrant, a lot of people get suckered into the not important and not urgent tasks, somehow find their way to the top of the to-do list because they're busy tasks. And like you've said, it's a great tool to really start to rate, is this task moving me forwards? Is it profitable? Is it, does it add value to my life? And do I want to be doing it? And I think often people end up, especially women, end up taking on everything and saying yes to things when they'd actually prefer to say no. And that's a big mindset piece to start guarding your time, planning your time and looking at it. And if you've got people making requests of you that you can't do, it's time to start flexing that no muscle.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, we put everything in the important and urgent. So that box is like jam packed, where we're like
overflowing
now, and I think boundaries, they're my favorite B word. I think boundaries are so freeing. I think they get a bad rap where we automatically assume boundaries are a wall or boundaries are a hard no, but that's not necessarily the case. And if we rethink of what a boundary is and why there's boundaries, we have so many boundaries in our society. We have personal space. We would never get too close to somebody because we know that boundary is not okay. We would never, expect a store to be open at maybe 4 a.m, because just because we're up doesn't mean that's when they're available. And yet we don't have those same personal boundaries, but when you communicate them and when you set them, it's actually freeing for yourself and everybody else around you, because you've let go of that expectation, you've let go of that guilt and that kind of responsibility of having to be available for everybody all the time. Even if, say, you offered, somebody asked a request, you say that your kid's PTA wants you to bake cookies. Maybe you say, I'd love to, but not this time. Can you sign me up for later? And then you're able to plan. You're able to have, again, that control back of your time, so that it's not one more thing to the pile, but it's far enough out that it's creating its own space.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I was just smirking then because I thought nobody from a PTA would ask me to bake anything. I've given my husband food poisoning twice, not with baking.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, nobody wants me to bake. So it's good. So I would, but again, this is also a really important talking point here, is when somebody asks you to do something in one way, it's completely okay to say to them, I can do it, but I'm going to have to do it this way. So for me, if somebody said to me, can you bake some cookies for the PTA? If I couldn't wiggle out of it, I'd say, you know what? I'm not going to bake any, but I'm going to buy some. I'm going to pay for some to be done by the baker.
On the table, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think it's also, we don't always have to say a hard no with a boundary. Sometimes it can be, actually, I can't do it that way. I can do it this way if you want me to do it. And where can I send them to? And that's, it's looking at how can you alternate a task that you need to do or want to do, but you're not going to do it in the way that's been asked. Can you do it another way? And it's just about communication. I think this is, I mean, we're going into a different direction with it, but it's about communicating effectively. And that's so important, to communicate your own needs effectively.
Absolutely. That's communications, knowing your options. And, so many times people say to me, I'm not comfortable saying no. How do I start to do that? And I always recommend starting with the easy no's. Don't make it the hard no to your boss on a new project. That's going to feel uncomfortable. But maybe start with something small. Everyone's getting together to go for coffee and you've got a lot on your plate. Rather than feeling bad about it, say, oh, thank you for inviting me. Start with that gratitude. I'm going to have to decline this time, but I would love to, let me know next time and I'll see what I can do. So it doesn't always have to be that hard negative no. It's just about, like you said, communicating, sharing your boundaries. Other people are going to support you. If you think about it, if someone came to you with those same statements, you would totally support a friend and be like, oh my gosh, you've got so much going on. We'll miss you, but we'll see you soon. You wouldn't be like, oh, really? And that's the thing. We need to treat ourselves the same way we would treat anybody else.
Yeah, and I think it's about communicating your truth. And I know for people who are chronic people pleasers, it's really difficult to be that honest sometimes. And like you said, you can start to practice with a very gentle no,
Mhm.
not today, but next week, or I can't do it this time, but when are you next doing it? I'm going to put it in the diary right now. And I think it's being okay with communicating your own needs. And we've kind of come full circle to a mindset again. Is that's a big piece to work on, is to place your own needs at the top of your importance
Mhm.
scale, at the top of your to-do list, and really start to think about when you're planning your day and you're busy and stressed out, is what can I feasibly take on today? Like you said, what can I delegate and what can I just drop entirely off the
Mhm.
list?
Absolutely. Because not only, I think when we put ourselves at the top of our priority list, not only do we feel better, but we model for our kids, how to do this. We show everyone around us how important we are and how we deserve and need to be treated. So it's not just about us, it's about everybody else around us. And I think it also kind of gives everyone that permission to do the same for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is when especially if you've got daughters, I think it's very important. There's a lot of women I know who kind of stuff their feelings down and just go along with what's happening in life, and they really don't want to. And I kind of look at it and think, why are you not saying anything? But unless it's modeled to you, and unless you are taught to speak up for yourself and say what you want and set boundaries, it's difficult to know how to do it. So that's such a great point, and I love that we've covered that. I'm going to wrap us up here.
Mhm.
I would love for you to share. You have a freebie for the listeners, and it's something relating to what we talked about today. Just share a little bit more about that, please.
Sure. It's called the Reclaim Your Time in 10-Minute Blocks cheat sheet. And it is everything we just talked about, the fact that, you just need sometimes just 10 minutes to be able to take that time and take for yourself. So it has some great ideas as far as how to carve out that 10 minutes and then what to do with it. Because so many times, if we don't know ahead of time what we want to do with our free time, that's where we can get stuck, scrolling on social media. Oh, I'm going to throw a quick load of laundry in. And so it has over 20 ideas of how to spend that time. And it doesn't, like I said, have to be alone. It could be with your kids, it can be with a friend, but being able to carve out those 10 minutes and try and do it a couple times a day. Like you said, you have a morning routine. I have a morning routine, a nighttime routine, and a little bit in the midday. So at least 3 times a day, I'm taking at least 10 minutes, if not a little bit more, for myself. And it makes such a massive difference. So Reclaim Your Time in 10-Minute Blocks cheat sheet is going to give you some great ideas.
Amazing. I'm going to pop the link to that in the show notes for folks to go and download. Where can people find you online, Daniela?
Sure. My website is bestdlife.com. I'm also on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, Best D Life. And yeah, reach out, ask any questions you have. I love to connect. I love to chat. I also have
Thank
a
you.
podcast as well, Best
Yes,
D Life with Daniela.
brilliant. I'm going to pop all the links to that in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you. Thank you again for what's been a really insightful and valuable conversation. I think anybody listening might want to go back and listen again with a notebook, because there was a lot of information shared here that's really going to help you reduce the overwhelm, care for yourself better, and be more productive.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you for being with us here today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Pop over and say hi on Instagram. I'm at Emma O'Brien Coach, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.